Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 3 of our exploration of Asian horror films released in 2019. Most of the films we're covering tonight are worth a watch, and they span a variety of industries. Now this part 3 has more consistency in terms of quality when compared to the first two parts that we covered in 2019. In fact, it was very difficult to order these movies in terms of quality and entertainment value. So they're all kind of interchangeable, but they're all very different in terms of like art house horror, popcorn horror, stuff like that. So I think most fans of Asian horror will be able to get something enjoyable out of most of these films. And remember, titles for all the movies I discussed will be listed in the description box below. Alright, so we're starting in South Korea tonight. In this one, more of a high-profile film. And that is The Divine Fury. This is a horror-action hybrid. The film begins with our protagonist as a child, making a delicious-looking breakfast. Unfortunately for him, that evening his father is killed by a person who is secretly possessed by a demon. As a consequence of losing his father, this kid loses faith in God. Years later, he grows up as a mixed martial arts fighting champion. But his past comes back to haunt him because he develops stigmata and teams up with a Vatican priest to perform exorcisms. So I'll tell you this right now. If you're expecting a crazy action horror flick that features some dude beating the crap out of demons with mixed martial arts maneuvers, you may be disappointed in this. The fact that he's a champion fighter really has no bearing on the conflict until the last act, when we finally get a substantial fight sequence involving the demons. But that's only near the end of the film. Okay, so again, do not go into this expecting a demon fighting movie. If you're thinking this is like the Korean version of Blade, don't go in thinking that. This is definitely more of a horror movie that revolves around exorcisms, and it's pretty good in that arena. There are a few bells and whistles that give it a different feel. For example, the demon possessions, in part, are initiated by a human spellcaster who has been possessed by a demon himself. So we get some ritualistic ceremonies that are pretty neat. There are a few other weird aspects that I will not spoil, but at least Divine Fury makes an effort to distinguish itself a bit from the typical exorcism film. And the final half hour is the highlight in this. It's the most action-heavy portion as well. Quite a satisfying finish. Production values in this one are good. There's some nice color and atmosphere. You get blues and oranges and mixes of those. And as an added bonus, veteran actor An Sung-ki has a major role as the priest exorcist. Always nice to see him, and if you're a fan of Korean cinema, you've probably seen this guy at least a dozen times over the years. So Divine Fury is a good flick. I do wish that they would have leaned into the action element a bit harder during the first two acts of the movie, would have distinguished it even further from your typical exorcism film. But as is, this is still a good flick. Alright, I recommend it. Now, availability, this is available on Tubi and Amazon. And I think there's also a physical media release out there. All right, pretty good start here. Now we're going to move away from South Korea. We're going to go to Thailand next. Yes, we're going to Thailand. Now, this movie is called Krasue, Inhuman Kiss, a horror romance hybrid. All right. In a faraway village lives an innocent teenage girl who soon discovers herself inheriting the curse of Krasue. At night, her head detaches from her body and hunts for flesh and blood. All right. Villagers are terrified by the deaths of their livestock, and that is when the Krasue hunt begins. A man joins the hunt with an unknown reason, while a childhood friend, who had just come back to the village, decides to stand beside the girl and support her, despite knowing the horrifying truth of her existence. Now, the story in this one is interesting enough. The lead protagonist is the one who turns into the monster, at nighttime, subconsciously and out of her control. She doesn't really do this intentionally, but she's portrayed in a likable manner, right? So even though she's kind of like the villain of the film, she's also the protagonist, which is kind of neat. The lead actress was nicely cast for this effect. Just, I don't know, she looks innocent is all I'll say. Now at times, you do question whether or not you should be rooting for her, because this is not under her control, given her condition. And the film shows her relationships with fellow villagers, as well as the potential conflict with the Krasue hunter, who shows up with a group of men to find and destroy her. There are a few interesting little tactics the protagonist uses to curb her nighttime hunger. There's a romance angle to this as well, which is actually pretty good. Now, if the description of this monster sounds familiar to you, there are similar legends from other Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia and the Philippines, and I've covered movies related to monsters like this from multiple countries in this horror playlist. Of course, the premise of the monster is outrageous to a certain extent, and that does result in some entertaining visuals. I would usually worry about special effects in a monster film like this, but it's handled well for most of the runtime. Her organs glow in the dark, which it looks pretty cool. There are a few cartoonish shots near the end during the finale, so be prepared for that. That is a criticism. But production values in general are good. It includes the camera work, the lighting, and the sound design. The music is eerie, and there's good performances. Now, I do need to point out that this is not really a scary film. Okay, the horror elements are more thematic. The subgenres of romance and drama do result in a movie that's less visceral, a bit lighter in terms of tone. But it's still pretty moody and engaging. Now, the runtime is almost 2 full hours. It's a bit on the slow side, with a few melodramatic scenes near the end, which do get a bit drawn out. But, it does get weepy at times. But this movie does have a heart, and I think the drama works, so I do recommend this. Now, Krasue is available on Daily Motion with subtitles. Now, this used to be on Netflix back in the day, but it was taken off. Now, we have another higher profile film, and we're going to Indonesia with this one. If you've noticed, in the last few years in this playlist, Southeast Asian countries have been ramping up production and almost kind of dominating the industry. And you'll see that over the next handful of years. Something I've noticed, like Indonesia and stuff, are really ramping up production. Even more so than usual. So you will see more Southeast Asian countries being covered in this playlist going forward. But anyways, our next film is called The Queen of Black Magic. Now I'm going to quote the Fantastic Fest description, written by Luke Mullen. Hanif, his wife Nadia, and their 3 children are taking a trip to meet up with his childhood friends and their wives at an orphanage where they all grew up. The man who raised the 3 of them is dying, and they want to pay their final respects before he passes. On the way, Hanif hits something with their car. Startled, he pulls over to check it out and sees a deer dying on the side of the road. A tragedy for sure, but the relatively commonplace one. Still, it's the first sign that something is wrong, signaling the beginning of the night full of evil and torment that will dredge up secrets and sins long thought buried. So this was directed by Kimo Stambol, one half of the Mo brothers, who also include Timo Tjahjanto, and it's a remake of the 1981 film of the same name, which is also good. This has more basic and cliche setup for a horror film. You get a group of people visiting a large house, bad stuff happens. We've seen this a million times before. Characters are decent, not that interesting. There is some questionable character decision-making as well, and some events feel contrived in their timing. This is a bit messy on the script writing front, okay? Now, thankfully, the scares start to ramp up near the half-hour mark, and this has some legitimately creepy scenes. The school bus scene and the video recording moments kind of freaked me out, personally. One disturbing scene involves a woman who looks at herself in a mirror. And there is some solid violence in this film as well. You will remember a few of the scenes after you finish the film. Special effects are a mix of CGI and practical. The CGI is noticeable at times, but it's still good enough. I do like Kimo's direction. I know a lot of people pay attention to Timo more with his action, like thriller hybrids and stuff, but Kimo is a good director, and this film looks good. He establishes some suspense. Acting is good from top to bottom. All right, so I did enjoy The Queen of Black Magic. Yes. Availability on this one. It's on Amazon streaming. All right, so availability of the films tonight are actually very good. It's actually very good availability. Nice to see this for Asian horror films. All right, the next one here. We're moving to a different country. All right, so we're country hopping tonight, folks. We really are. The next one here, we're going to Laos with the next one. And this is The Long Walk, a Laotian horror drama. The following plot synopsis was taken from the Dark Eyes of London website. It's the story of an older man living in a Laos of the near future who scavenges motorcycle parts to get by. He was the last person to see a missing woman alive, the latest in a string of absences that suggest the activities of a serial killer. But the old guy has a gift. Supposedly he could speak to the dead, and he is approached by the missing woman's daughter for this purpose. In an apparent separate story, a young boy lives with his ill mother and angry drunken father on their farm, and has his first encounter with death when he finds the body of a woman in an undergrowth. At the same time, he befriends a mysterious, silent girl, and from her learns to navigate the mysteries of life and death. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this one, just based on the plot synopsis alone. The director is Maddie Doe, who I've covered multiple times on this playlist. I reviewed Chantalet from 2012 and Dearest Sister from 2016, previously within this playlist. Her films are always glacially paced, so you will need some patience when watching them. This includes all of her movies. But it's nice to see, she has a good overall quality to her films, though. Now, The Long Walk is no exception to this previous trend. It does move very slowly, okay? But the drama becomes stronger due to us spending time with the characters and seeing their dilemmas. In addition, this does have an elliptical storyline that does not present everything in an easy-to-follow way. Because of this, it may require multiple viewings in order to understand and figure out all of the story beats and character motivations. So this one it's going to stimulate the brain. You got to be in the mood to think when you watch this, if you want to understand it. Now, horror-wise, this is somewhat unnerving, with a very effective ominous score that kicks in, and there are some corpse shots and a few wince-worthy bloody moments later on. Some of the nighttime atmosphere is good. Small bright lights are used to navigate rural areas. And as I mentioned, the presentation style will definitely be a hurdle for some viewers, but the overall quality is so high, I still think this is a solid recommendation. So if you're doing one of those, you're having friends over one night and you want to watch a fun horror movie, do not fire this up, okay? This is not one of those. This is a movie you watch by yourself when you could just focus and relax, okay? Good flick, though. I liked it. Availability of The Long Walk. It's available streaming on YouTube, Amazon, and the Roku channel. All right. Our next stop is Malaysia. So this is the 5th film we're covering, and we have a different country with every film we're covering so far tonight. So it's kind of crazy. So we're in Malaysia now. Now, for the record, I have reviewed a handful of Malaysian films on this channel. Within this playlist alone, we got Hysteria from 2008, Three Doors of Horrors from 2013, The Noise from 2015, and Munafik from 2016 as a few examples. And then I also reviewed the action flick Weira from 2019 in a separate video on my channel. So we're at least somewhat familiar with Malaysia. And this film is called Ro, also known as Soul, again from 2019. So cut off from civilization, a mother puts her children on high alert when they bring home a young girl caked in clay. The mother warns her children by telling tales of spirits and spirit hunters. But these are not mere superstitions, folks. As more strangers show up on her doorstep, she quickly finds another reason to fear the forest. Ro has been on my radar for quite a while. It hit some festival circuits over the past handful of years and has earned mostly positive reviews. One thing I really enjoyed about this one was that there's a very primal feel to this, from the creepy opening scene to the introduction of our protagonists, who live in the middle of a forest. And for someone like me who, I live in the suburbs, so a movie that features these kinds of locales and lifestyles is a look into a more fundamental way of living, and it excludes and omits all the stuff that comes with advanced technology in the modern day. So it's always kind of refreshing to see that portrayed in a film, in my opinion. Now, this is set during the hot summer months. Good atmosphere because of that. The nighttime scenes involve some handheld lanterns, which add some gloomy visuals. Lots of superstitious, occultish content in this, from piles of dirt that look like human bodies, to the use of animal blood, to the placement of rocks outside of a residence, to rituals, etc. Deliberately paced, but it's not quite as slow as The Long Walk. This is more along the lines of mainstream entertainment. It's not quite there. It's not a popcorn flick, but it's more balanced, I think, in terms of, entertainment value and artistry. Okay? There is some subtle communication and subjectivity during the final 20 or so minutes, so you do have to pay attention to this, but it's not that difficult to follow. Now, in terms of scares, this does have some creepy stuff in it. It gets bloody in spots as well. There are no big set pieces in this one, and it's mostly a slowly increased sense of dread, is how I would describe this. Very nicely shot, the acting is good. Just a good quality flick, and it's only 85 minutes long. So I definitely recommend Ro. It's a pretty impressive film, I think. Availability, it's on Tubi and Amazon. Again, very easy to find these, folks. Now, I would say we've covered 5 movies. I would say at least a few of those 5 that we've covered already are high-quality films. Like The Long Walk and Ro, especially if you like artistry, those are higher quality. But the pacing on those does hurt them a little bit, I think. So I guess that's why the next 4 films I covered are maybe a little bit more entertaining, purely entertaining films. All right, so the next one here, we're going back to South Korea, okay? And that is Metamorphosis. After failing to exorcise a possessed girl, Jung-soo attempts to leave the church for a much quieter life. Unfortunately for him, the same demon has now targeted his brother's family, which consists of a husband, wife, and 3 children. This particular entity has the ability to jump from person to person at will, and uses this ability to create distrust and conflict between the family members. Can they survive? Well, that's always a question in these movies. So this film begins with a typical Catholic-style exorcism of a girl on a bed, but it's more bloody and grisly than you might expect. Good way to start the movie, because it shows us that although Metamorphosis has a cliche concept, it also has enough bite to compensate. Now, the film's conventionality is its biggest weakness, okay? We've seen this concept done a million times before, but the execution makes up for some of that. That's not to say that the plot is completely predictable. It's not that predictable. The setup and ultimate resolution are basic, but there are a few very surprising moments in this that I was kind of like, wow, they actually went there. So I do give the film some credit, and I do appreciate that. It did mix in a few surprising moments. Production values in this are nice. That includes the lighting. We get multiple vibrant colors in the same shots. We get cold and warm colors, like blue and orange. There's also an abrupt night-to-day transition that I rarely see in films, and it was pretty interesting and disorienting. More bloody and intense than what you might expect going into this. A few violent moments were surprising to me. There were also some creepy imagery on display, like rock formations and occult-like decorations within these residences. Yeah, a few of these scenes are pretty creepy, I think. Now, this entity, as the plot synopsis suggested, shifts between characters, meaning that a different character will act strangely at different times, even during the same scene. So you'll have, like, let's say this entity was in my house. I would be acting normally right now, and then the entity would jump into me, and I'd start acting like creepy and doing some weird stuff, right? And the family members would be like, what is wrong with this guy? But the next day, or even within the same scene, the entity would jump out of me, and I would act normally again. You know what I mean? So it creates a lot of distrust within the family, because someone will do something egregious and everyone will get pissed at them. But it wasn't their fault and they don't remember what they've done when the entity is inside them. So it's like, it's a very difficult situation for the protagonist to figure out, like, what the heck is going on, or who the entity is in at any given point in time. And there are some good actors in this. Fans of Korean cinema will see some recognizable faces here. This includes Bae Sung-woo, who is usually restricted to supporting roles in movies and K-dramas. But he actually gets a bigger role in this, which was nice to see. I've always liked him. Always liked him. Alright, so Metamorphosis, I think I like this more than your average person. There's just something about this one, and I rewatched it last week. It just does a good job of maintaining entertainment value. And maybe some people might like The Divine Fury more than this. You know, they're both kind of exorcism-style films. They have a different, splash to them, different, vibe. But I thought Metamorphosis was just the better film overall. It held my interest more consistently. This is available on YouTube and Amazon. All right, next we're going back to Indonesia. We have not hit Japan yet, which is kind of crazy. But we're going to Indonesia next. And this one is called DreadOut. DreadOut. Straight up horror flick. Now, this synopsis was taken from the Voices from the Balcony website. A prequel to the popular Indonesian video game of the same name. DreadOut follows a fairly familiar plot. A group of aspiring YouTube stars sneaking into an alleged haunted building to find stories that are all too real. They do a live stream from a local apartment building where a cult met a violent end, mid-ritual. They grab their friends and recruit a newbie since she knows the security guard and can get them in. They're warned not to go to the 6th floor, so of course they do. They find some of the cult's belongings, including some with writing only Linda can see. She reads it and opens the portal to another dimension. Well, this was directed by Kimo Stambol. So yeah, Kimo, I mean, we're covering Kimo twice in a movie here, or in a video, right? He did The Queen of Black Magic, and now he's doing this. So alright, we're covering him twice. This is, it's kind of crazy. The biggest positive to this film is that the pacing is brisk. It is fast in this. There's not a lot of downtime. It's loaded with horror scenes, and it feels like something Thailand would have released back in the mid-2000s. This is popcorn entertainment, okay? Now, the camera work shifts between first-person and third-person perspectives early on, and it does it fairly well. Almost the entire film is third-person, though, okay? The story, I would say in this, it's fine. A few of the protagonists are kind of annoying. But the main talking point of DreadOut is the horror and atmosphere. And it throws a lot of this at you. Get some cool visuals. I like the foggy cemetery with the corpses reaching out from the ground. A pocong ghost emerges with a sickle in their hand. There's a little bit of CGI in this that's used to accentuate the ghost, but it's effective and they rely mostly on practical effects. The whirlpool effects are pretty neat as well. That's how the characters are like transported to the other dimension. And some of the sets are good too, like the room that is torch lit and has some stone thrones in the middle. Few scenes are decently creepy, like the ghost who emerges near the pond. I mean, this is like the whole movie. It's just like horror scenes thrown at you. You know what I mean? All the time. The possession scenes are pretty good. The opening scene has some sort of like humanoid demon who bleeds black blood. Like, this movie has like a bunch of stuff in it. The protagonists are constantly running around and dealing with some kind of threat, and that aspect does make the film entertaining. I would not mind watching this again at some point in the future. I have the unsubtitled DVD, I believe. But yeah, this is a popcorn movie, and because of the pacing, I actually rate it higher than Row and The Long Walk. Even though Row and The Long Walk are probably better stories and higher quality movies overall, I think DreadOut just has like that entertainment value to it that I like. So that's, it depends on what you want, folks. Like I said, it was hard to order these tonight. DreadOut is available on Tubi and Amazon. All right. Now we have 2 left, and they're both horror comedies. So we're ending off on a lighter tone this evening. And we're finally hitting Japan, folks. We're hitting Japan in part 3 here. And this is The Ghost Master. And the following plot synopsis was taken from the Phenomena Fest website. The shooting of a low-budget adolescent romantic drama has started in a ruined school, aiming to make a quick profit. Akira Kurosawa, this is the guy's name in the movie. He's not playing the actual director, but this is his name. He's an untalented assistant director, unlike his prestigious namesake. Having a hard time on set, his only reason for continuing is his script of Ghostmaster that he carries with him, hoping that it will get produced as his directorial debut film. Sadly, however, Kurosawa finds out there's no chance his project will ever see the light. He goes into a depressed rage that transfers evil energy into the script of Ghostmaster, which in turn possesses one of the actors of the romantic drama. Following the cursed Ghostmaster script, which has now been written as a cruel and bloody romantic horror film. Alright, so this is pretty nutty, folks. And if you couldn't have guessed it, there are many references to other horror films within this, as well as specific shout-outs to a bunch of real-life horror movie directors. They make direct references to the Evil Dead franchise, and even Life Force. Life Force gets like multiple references in this. Now, if you've never seen Life Force, it's a British sci-fi horror film from 1985, and it's an overlooked classic in my opinion. I mean, it gets good reviews online, but a lot of people don't really know about it. So if you have never seen Life Force, check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. In any case, our protagonist in Ghostmaster is a sniffling klutz. Early on. He takes a lot of disrespect from everyone on set. I don't blame them because this guy is kind of useless, and he does not have much in terms of skills. But that's his setup here. Now the movie kicks into high gear around the 25-minute mark when the demonic book gets pissed off and attacks people. And it's legitimately entertaining and funny. Some of these death scenes are outrageous. They're hilariously funny and gory and bloody as well. So I don't want to ruin the surprises, so I'm not going to tell you the specific death scenes that happen, but they're pretty entertaining if you like horror comedy stuff. The gore effects are pretty good. It is a mix of practical and CGI, but I do think they're good. The comedy it mostly works. It gets a little silly at times, but with some exaggerated acting for sure, but it does work overall. And they do blend in the theme of filmmaking into some of these set pieces. Now, during the final act, we get an extended fist fight, which is surprisingly nice, and some unusual weaponry during that scene as well. Now, the very end of this movie, this movie almost has like the finale 15 minutes before the end of the film. So the finale happens, you're like, well, what else is going to happen here? Well, the story ends up taking itself more seriously during this final 15 to 20 minute segment, which is questionable of a decision by the filmmakers, but it is unexpected and quite interesting. There's a brisk pace and a low-budget charm to this. A fun little movie. Yeah, this is a fun little flick. Ghostmaster, folks. If you like horror comedies that reference other horror movies on a fairly consistent basis, check this out. This is a good flick. Ghostmaster is available streaming on Tubi and Amazon. And then finally, our final film in the evening, we're rotating back to South Korea. And this is called The Odd Family, Zombie on Sale, also known as just Zombie on Sale, a horror comedy. Human Bio, the biggest pharmaceutical company in Korea, conducts illegal experiments on humans. One day, a test goes wrong and results in the creation of a zombie. Soon in the remote countryside, the oddball Park family makes their acquaintance with the zombie in question. Rather than being afraid of the strange creature, the Park family plots to make money out of him. Only the daughter takes a liking to the creature and nicknames him Zongbi. So you get the joke there? Instead of zombie, she names him Zongbi. Alright? But will Zongbi create a home with this weirder than zombie family? So yeah, there are actually some pretty big surprises in this movie that turn the zombie mythos kind of on its head. And you can tell the scriptwriters put some imagination into this. And those writing decisions are what makes this movie stick out when compared to other zombie comedies. The first half especially, you're like, man, this is definitely a little different. Definitely a little different. Now, the second half is more conventional, but the movie evens itself out, I think. Our characters are these normal, everyday, klutzy people who live in, like, the farmlands or, like, whatever, and they cannot fight well. Nobody in this film can fight, okay? And they're fighting against traditional George Romero zombies, like Night of the Living Dead zombies. So if you're going into this expecting, like, oh, I'm going to have a horror comedy with, like, high-octane action, you're not going to get it. Do not come into this expecting that, okay? But that's okay, because there's a healthy infusion of comedy into this. So it's okay to have, like, klutzy characters attempting to very ineptly escape from these zombies. A few of the jokes are a bit wacky, but there are also a bunch of charming moments and chuckle-worthy gags to enjoy. It's fairly unexpected at times, and it's different enough to be memorable. There are a few nice shots of the countryside. There are a few yellowish-green grassland shots that I really liked in this. And we do have a few recognizable actors in this, one of whom is Kim Nam-gil, who played B-Dom in the K-drama Queen Sun Duck. And if anybody saw that K-drama, he was the character who, like, stole the show. So it was nice seeing him in this. And he plays, like, a douchey character, but the actor's so good, he's likably douchey, is how I would describe him. And he kind of makes this movie, I gotta say. But even some of the main characters, you've seen them a bunch of times in other movies. So similar to the last few films we covered tonight, this is just a fun movie. Kind of popcorn-style fun flick. Alright? So I do recommend this. Now, The Odd Family is available streaming on Amazon. And I'm sure it has a physical media release as well. So yeah, tonight we had, like, a lot of just good, solid horror films and horror comedies. And art house horror films. So, again, the 2019, I think, for Asian horror was a very consistent year. It was. There was a lot of just movies that were just good. You know what I'm saying? Now, how many of these movies were really good? Well, we're going to find out in part 4 in my next video. And I would say, looking at the list, a few of these are very good movies or highly entertaining flicks. So I look forward to covering them. And if you were expecting more Japanese movies in this video and you only got one, well, we're going to have more in part 4 for sure. All right? So that concludes part 3 of our journey through Asian horror films released in 2019. Pick a few that seem interesting to you and check them out. And join me for part 4 in the next few weeks, and we'll cover the best Asian horror titles from this year. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.